Hi, I'm Earl,
I am Angelica.
And I'm Dale.
and in today's episode of Let Me Explain, we'll be explaining to you common TCP attacks that hackers usually use to disrupt your network connection.
Yes, that's right. Specifically, we'll be tackling the following attacks, which are TCP SYN flood attack, TCP reset attack, and TCP session hijacking.
We'll be explaining to you what these attacks are, explain the methods used in the attack, and give you tips on how to avoid and mitigate such exploitations.
So without further ado, let's start with the TCP SYN flood attacks. A TCP SYN or synchronization flood attack is a common type of denial of service attack that targets the system by flooding it with multiple SYN requests that overwhelm and saturates the system, making it unable to process or finish any connection request. We are all aware of the TCP three-way handshake, which establishes TCP protocol connection. And the first step in this three-way handshake is to send a SYN flag requesting for a connection to the TCP server. By flooding such requests, the communication port in the target server will become heavily saturated with requests, making it too busy to a point that it stops responding or processing all the incoming requests, making the connection half open or did not proceed to the acknowledgement phase. And this is where the server will turn into a crash, which makes it down and inaccessible. So why do hackers opt for this attack? Given that it is a denial of service attack, the reason to do such exploit is to crash a server, hindering the users in accessing the data in a certain server or site. It may seem like this is just a minor exploit, but depending on the target being exploited, this kind of attack can be real serious. In fact, the second most dangerous denial of service attack, acknowledged by globaldots.com, is a SYN flood attack happened on September of 1996, targeting Panix, the internet service provider of New York City at that time. The servers went down for 36 hours straight, which completely disrupted the busy city of New York. And just imagine how much work is lost in those hours. So what can we do to mitigate such attacks? Well, as we are just consumers, it is not our task to prevent such exploit as the attack is targeted towards the server. On the case of server administrators, on the other hand, they can implement further policies in preventing such failure in the ports of the server, such as limiting the rate of SYN requests permitted on the server, applying an intrusion detection system which responds and blocks malicious traffic such as the attack, opting for SYN cookies which tags the request with an identifier and blocking the request permanently, and lastly, better half-open management such as improved queue for requests and recycling of half-open connections. The next attack that we'll be explaining is somehow similar to the SYN flood attacks, still about TCP protocol, which is the TCP RST attack to be discussed by Ms. Angelica.
So we move on to the next attack, which is the TCP RST or reset attack, which is another denial of service attack targeting two connecting victims into abandoning the TCP connection. So basically in TCP connections, establishment of connection between the two devices is a must prior to sending data or information. This is where the TCP three-way handshake enters the scene, which ensures that there is a connection between the devices. However, if a device is not responding to a request of another device, this device will receive an RST or reset flag to abort the connection. This is the main highlight of this attack, where the hacker sends a fake RST flag through a spoof packet to both of the devices, aborting their connection. Though it may seem easy, creating the perfect spoof packet is actually quite challenging, as it must fit the properties of other segments in the target connection. But with a skilled hacker, this method is actually ideal for them, as they take advantage of the fact that TCP segments and even IP packets doesn't have information to verify a sender's identity. With this, there's actually a legitimate use for this attack, which is used by the Great Firewall of China and some Iranian internet censors to block their users in accessing a certain site or information. So how do we mitigate such attacks? There's this command in routers called TCP ACK RST and SYN command, which protects the router from such denial of service attacks. Another is implementing IPsec, which is an extension to IP providing authentication measures. As we move forward to the last TCP attack to be discussed in this video, TCP session hijacking to be discussed by Ms. Dale.
Thank you, Angelica. So, similar to the previous two attacks, this exploit focuses on the TCP protocol, which exploits the TCP handshake process. From the word itself, it hijacks a TCP connection between computers, inserting commands into that active communication by disguising itself as one of the hosts in the connection. Another form of session hijacking is known as man-in-the-middle attack, where the attacker can observe the communication that happens between the target devices. There are different ways of session hijacking, and these are just some of the most common hijacking techniques. First is using packet sniffers. In this method, the attacker sniffs a packet or session ID from the target and uses this data to act like the victim in accessing the web server. Another technique is cross-site scripting or XSS attack, where an attacker sets up a crafted link with a malicious JavaScript. When clicked by the user, the functions inside the JavaScript will run, which can be used both in sniffing and redirecting the user to a malicious web page. Third is IP spoofing, which is a technique used to gain unauthorized access to a computer where the target host is trusted by pretending to be the target host. This works by obtaining the IP address of the target computer and creating spoofed packets injected to the connection, fooling the server that the source of these packets is actually the trusted host. Lastly is a blind attack, which is just a brute force way of hijacking the connection through combination of sequences and spoofed packets. This is used if the attacker does not have any information about the target host. To mitigate such attacks, the main way to go is to better encrypt the packets so that the hijacker cannot decipher information stored in the packet headers. This can be achieved by implementing internet security protocols such as IPsec, SSL, SSH, and the like, which will be covered in our next episode of Let Me Explain.
So that sums up the 3 most common attacks related to the TCP protocol. Always remember to stay safe by encrypting your connection and by thinking before you click any link from the internet. Once again, I am Earl.
I am Angelica.
And of course, I am Dale.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Let Me Explain, and we'll see you in the next one.